Precisa ferir a pressão, medir a glicemia ou tomar uma vacina? Na Drogasil tem exames, testes e calendário vacinal completo. E o que é melhor, tem sempre uma Drogasil aí perto de você. É fácil, prático e rápido. Dá para ir entre uma música e outra. Procure nossos farmacêuticos. Quanto mais você conhece o que a gente faz na Drogasil, mais você se cuida. O que acende a sua vontade de começar algo? Tem uma faísca em você que te chama para empreender, investir, dar novos rumos para sua vida. E para todos os seus começos, você pode contar com Santander Select. Um banco mais pessoal, mais próximo, mais humano. Um time de especialistas com olhar atento para cada momento da sua vida. Porque você sabe, só quem já deu muitos passos está pronto para continuar começando. Santander Select. Começa em você, começa agora.
The Athletic.
The first big question mark of the 2025 MotoGP rider market has been answered, and it's been answered by a rider trying to stay put after all for potentially a rather big paycheck. Fabio Quartararo will not be leaving Yamaha, despite having the chance to do so, despite having been, somewhat negative about Yamaha once or twice over the last couple of years. This is the Race MotoGP podcast, and this is a slightly different episode than the one originally planned, but we're still going to bring you that as well. So this is kind of a 2-in-1 bonus deal for you. It's like a sprint and a Grand Prix on the same weekend, if you like that sort of thing, which my colleagues Simon Patterson and Val Khorounzhiy have got mixed feelings about. So we're going to talk about the Fabio Quartararo news in a second, and we will also be bringing you our interview with MotoGP sporting director Carlos Ezpeleta, which was the original plan for this week before Fabio Quartararo threw some news into the mix as well. So who knows how long this episode will go on for, even by our standards. Also, though, before we talk about the Quartararo news, just as we sat down to record this, Val and Simon, we heard news from Italy that Andrea Dovizioso had been injured in a motocross accident. Simon, what do we know about that situation so far?
At the minute, what we know is seemingly quite limited. There was initial quite terrifyingly scary reports that Dovi had been air ambulanced away from a motocross track with a severe head injury. Thankfully, that's been kind of dialed back a little bit by Sky Sports Italy, who are normally pretty on the money with this. And they're saying that the head injury that he sustained was a concussion, which, while obviously serious, isn't life-threatening, and that he's on the mend from that. Sounds like he's also broken his collarbone, maybe some ribs and a wrist. So a pretty big smash for a motocross thing, but thankfully not quite as bad as we had first anticipated, I think.
Yeah, obviously this you always wince a little bit when you hear about a head injury and a motorcycle rider of any kind, and these situations do sometimes develop over time as the full extent of injuries becomes clear, of course. But from everything we're now hearing, it seems like you say, it's not as worrying as it first sounded. So best wishes to Dovi from everyone at the race for a swift recovery and continuing with enjoying your retirement. On to the Quartararo news. Now, can you two remember where we put Quartararo when we predicted the 2025 rider market?
Yamaha.
I think we agreed he wasn't shifting in the end, didn't we? And that has come true. So we were correct. He is not shifting. But Val, should he have done?
No, I don't think so. But before I go into that, the initial impulse of seeing that he's re-signed is, I think, one of slight disappointment. Not just because we're all agents of chaos who like as much movement as possible, but just because I certainly feel a lack of faith in Yamaha right now. I'm not very impressed with how they started the season, and I think Fabio Quartararo deserves to be competing higher up than he is right now. And clearly I'm not alone in that, because we polled people on our social media page at the Race Moto, and 60% are not too impressed. 40% are okay with it. But the thing is, you said he had the option to leave. It's just the more I think about it, and from what we've heard specifically about the terms that were offered, I'm not sure how much of an option to leave it really was. Spanish Motorsport, Oriol Puigdemont, who's reliable always in these sort of matters, and in most matters, all matters really, said that it was 4 million from Aprilia, it was 12 million plus bonuses from Yamaha, around those numbers in the ballpark. Obviously, might differ a little bit, margin of error, whatever. But even if it's a 50% discrepancy, that's just the point where you hang up the phone. If they can't compete for him, then why even bother? And I like Aprilia. I like their bike a lot. I like what they've been able to do in terms of modernizing their whole operation. The impact Massimo Rivola has had, very impressive. Tech director Romano Bilciano has been cooking up some amazing bikes, fragile, oscillating in performance, but really, really good, impressive. They're at the forefront of a lot of MotoGP's development that maybe we don't like on a wider scale, but we're impressed in the singular points, how much they've driven the aero, what else they've been able to do, their chassis work. But it's not a question. You can't, there's no dilemma here. Fabio Quartararo is going to be 25 this month. There are no guarantees for a motorcycle rider to stay healthy, to be always able to command a salary, that kind of situation. Obviously, for mere mortals, rightly, maybe 12 million and 4 million isn't actually that much different. I'd probably do about the same with 12 million and 4 million and 1 million, taxes, etc., whatever. But this was a choice between a career payday at a manufacturer that's lesser but with a better track record overall, or a punt at a considerable personal expense with a manufacturer that's not exactly winning right now. It was no choice at all. There was never going to be any other outcome here.
I mean, I get 100% why Aprilia tried to take the shot, because in a word, it's Marc Marquez, right? If Gresini Ducati can lure Marc Marquez away from Repsol Honda, then any team in MotoGP can sign any rider, and you have to at least try. But for me, it's entirely about the money for Fabio, but it's not about the money that goes into his bank account. That's the way I look at this. The fact that Yamaha had 3 times as much to offer him means that they probably also have 3 times as much to spend on the bike.
Yeah.
And right now, neither of these bikes are winning MotoGP races. Neither of these bikes are Ducati. And this is a contract that's going to take us into a new era of MotoGP with essentially brand new start from scratch bikes. So I understand why he looks at the team that is capable of giving him the biggest commitment and sees the money not as the opportunity for an extra €8 million a year to spend on, I don't know, supercars and designer clothes, whatever Fabio spends his money on. But it's a factory that's willing to spend even more than that on building, on improving the bike that they currently have and building a better one for the new regs in 2027. I think it makes all of the sense in the world to me. I think that Yamaha have already shown that not just that they're willing to spend money to invest in Fabio and in the bike, but that they're already doing that. They're willing to let him lead the path that they take by, massively revamping how the entire Yamaha racing structure works. Like, for Matt, you said it, that we've listened to a lot of Fabio moaning over the last 18 months, and we have. And one of those things has been most consistently that Yamaha needs to start doing things the way that the European factories do things. And Yamaha listened to that, and for the first time ever, we have a European project leader building a Japanese MotoGP bike. So they have done what he asked of them. And then they've went and made an offer that quite clearly reinforces that they want to continue doing what he needs. And I don't think he really had any other option to go anywhere else and get that level of support.
I agree almost completely with Simon. I think ultimately it's not just a question of the discrepancy in earnings. It's a question of, if you can't afford to even be competitive here, what else can't you afford? Which is, unmistakable. This is not like some sort of sports salary cap situation where you take a discount on the rider's salary side so that they supercharge the development. No, it's just a question of financial capacity, as far as we can tell, really. And yeah, my one thing is, the one thing I don't necessarily agree with is that Yamaha has shown him anything worth putting faith into, apart from the hires, which is fair enough. The hires have been reasonably impressive. The bike's still bad. So that's, like, I've seen, it has not done anything, the M1, as it stands. If you're basing it solely like off the capacity of the bike, then re-signing is just a money thing, because the bike's still bad and it will take it a little bit to improve. I think there's still a very good chance coming into next season that the Aprilia is better. I think increasingly, every year it feels like, is this the year the Aprilia fairy tale sort of pumps the brakes? And no, that hasn't really happened. I think we have to put a bit more faith into its technical department. But at the same time, it's not winning championships. Maybe Fabio could get into outside contention. There's probably a chance the RSGP will be better than the M1 still next year. But that outside dream isn't worth the massive discount or the longer term planning. Like longer term, coming into 27, you still might be better off with Yamaha, and you'll also be a lot richer.
Just to add a very brief bit of context to this, because I've just done a very quick Google of it while we're talking. Piaggio Group, which is Aprilia's overall group, the big
parent company
organization that includes all sorts of different manufacturers like Moto Guzzi, Gilera. They sold 466,000 motorbikes last year. Yamaha sold 4.6 million. Like, they're outselling them by like, what's that, 6-1? It is no wonder that there's more money in Yamaha to spend in racing. And we're seeing that.
I think when I was looking it up, you'll remember this on Slack, I went into online like researching Piaggio revenue just to see what they could actually spend on Fabio. And it looks like any significant like expenditure to make it competitive almost is like in the margins of mortgaging the future of the company or whatever, or at least like a significant outlay in terms of the investment. Whereas for Yamaha, it's a lot more, not drop in the ocean, but a lot more justifiable. I'm not blaming Aprilia for not being competitive with its offer if the numbers reported are correct, because, well, you gotta play the hand you're dealt and you gotta try. And ultimately, it probably isn't in a position to where it can afford to just shove 10 million towards an elite rider. It probably doesn't even make a whole lot of sense to do it. It has to do it to go for its championship battle the way Suzuki did. It has to find areas where it can, with less investment, it can make the difference. And those areas also can be young riders. Suzuki is where it is because it took fantastic punts on young riders. I think that is Aprilia's future. I do not think it has the capacity or the need to go for franchise riders if that would require such a financial commitment that isn't doable.
The other thing is that from a purely business perspective, like, Aprilia are here to make headlines.
Yeah.
And you get the sense that they enjoy being the underdog and they enjoy selling that as what they are, because they're not a big manufacturer. They're not Ducati or KTM or Yamaha or Suzuki or Honda. They're smaller, and they sell that narrative really well with the riders that they have. And, arguably, an Aleix Espargaro win when no one expects it on the RSGP is worth far, far more in terms of marketing value than, say, a Fabio Di Giannantonio win in a Gresini Ducati.
Well, that does raise... Well, there's 2 points from here. There's an Aprilia one and a Yamaha one. Because I was wondering, when the details of this started to come out and you saw what the financial gap was, part of me was thinking, does this not just end Aprilia's bid to sign Quartararo? Does it harm Aprilia's bid to sign another big rider? Do other people who are looking for works rides look to Aprilia and go, oh, I'm not going to earn a lot there? And my feeling is probably not, because Quartararo is the only kind of world champion or person who'd be commanding that big a salary anyway. But Simon, you shook your head straight away there as well.
The fundamental difference in him and the other people that they are going to be looking at for this ride is that he's already got a factory ride.
Yes.
And all of the other contenders here don't. And that is going to be, it's going to be that rider ego, rider status, ability to say you're a factory rider thing that the Marco Bezzeckis, the Jorge Martins of the world don't have. And maybe even the Enea Bastianinis, if he finds himself without a factory seat at Ducati, whatever way that shakes out. That's the people that they're going to be looking for here. And they don't have what Fabio already does have. Yeah,
it would have, going to Aprilia, I think, would have required a pay cut also relative to what he currently earns at Yamaha. No MotoGP rider wants to take a pay cut unless they've already won 6 titles and just want to have a good end to their career. Nobody wants to take a pay cut. So that's just impossible to sell, basically, most of the time. Nobody wants a title this badly, as sad as that sounds.
Apart from possibly Marc Marquez in his particular situation.
Yeah, that is the one exception. Apart from people who have already won what they were going to win. Yeah.
No, but whose house is not short of trophies already.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Probably selling them off every week.
Probably made of trophies if he wanted it to, including on the podiums. He could probably use that as like foundations and build an extension. Be really shiny.
Yeah, but
anyway,
I think the numbers did make me wonder a little bit, and it's not specifically because of the Aprilia offer, because I think the Aprilia offer is fine, but it's just I don't see Jorge Martin taking that, for instance. I don't see Jorge Martin going, I'm fine being paid 3 times less than Fabio Quartararo after the heater that I've been on in MotoGP. The others, maybe Martin, who is already one of the best riders in MotoGP, who doesn't really have that much to prove right now, who knows his value. For him, I think, let's say if Honda comes up with like a similar offer to what Yamaha is giving Fabio, I don't know. I mean, I think he would take that because he also really wants to be valued.
Yeah. The only thing is the benefit that they have over the Ducati riders here is that we know Ducati pay small salaries, big bonuses.
Big bonuses, yeah.
So as a base sum, this is probably the rival of pretty much any Ducati contract apart from maybe Bagnaia. So you know, as a safe bet, if you're kind of thinking you're not going to win a title on a satellite Ducati and rack up a load of wins and a load of bonuses that way, it will look better, and that probably does apply to Martin as well. But it certainly applies to the likes of Bezzecchi or Di Gianantonio.
I imagine he is raking in the bonuses. I imagine, like not to an absurd level, not to where he's earning more than Mark at Honda or whatever. But I imagine he's doing quite all right, and he'll back himself to continue in that vein. And honestly, like seeing this kind of discrepancy, you'd almost really genuinely give some thought to staying at Pramac, except that's, I don't want to say an insult, but that's kind of an insult of a different kind. Like it's not a too low assume. Yeah, exactly. So he's sort of in this weird situation where honestly, maybe for the career, swallowing your pride and just continuing to absolutely wreck shop at Pramac might be the best option, but I think he really just wants a show of like faith from somebody. And whether that's the factory Ducati team just by virtue of the works bikes, or Honda just pulling up trucks of cash to his house and going, save us.
Yeah, Jorge Martin is not a man who wastes the chance to be affronted, is he? If there's the potential to feel a bit slighted and then take some kind of power from that, he certainly will. Yeah. Bless him. Looking back to Quartararo then and Yamaha and the options Yamaha might have had if Quartararo had walked, did it have to spend this much to keep hold of him? Is he as essential as that price tag makes him seem to Yamaha's future success? Simon nodded. Yeah,
I think so. I think that they know they've got a very, very capable, very proven race winner, title winner. Everyone in MotoGP is very much of the opinion that he deserves to have more than one title, and that it's the bike that has prevented that. If he's given them the vote that the bike can get better and that they can get the bike back to the level it needs to be, then they absolutely should be taking the vote on him to be the guy that will win them more championships with it. I think that's basically a given.
Yeah, I think there's a question of, I do talk about timing a lot in terms of whether a rebuilding project really needs an elite rider. But I think in Yamaha's case, this is still a young guy who you want to keep your relationship with. It's still important just for the vibe in the building. He is your chosen one. And if he left you right now, it would almost even be different to Mark leaving Honda in a way, because at least for Mark, it's, age 30 plus. It's a different stage of his career. Whereas it's like the vote of no confidence that would come from Fabio, age 24, going, actually, no, I'd rather take my chance with somebody who's paying me a lot less. I think he probably has played this really well. I imagine that all of his active flirting and vocal anger at the state of the bike has added $1 million or $2 million. I don't know. I would not be surprised. And if so, well done. But also, you have to overpay when your bike's not good. That's fair. That seems fair to me. I think they had to keep him. Yeah, because also it's not like you can just snap up a ready-made replacement and cultivate him for 2027, even if 27 is your earliest window of contention, or 26, because all the like absolute best top tier talents in Moto2 right now are being snapped up by other people. Yeah, I think they had to do it. I think they'll feel good about it. I wonder how Fabio will feel about it when it's Kota and he's out in Q1 again, but let's see.
Yeah, I would love for him to have left Yamaha purely for the side of me that likes the fact that change is good for listenership, readership, storylines. You know, Mark going to Rossini's been a wonderful thing to follow from the media side, and you know, Quartararo going screw the money. You know, I don't buy a lot of buttons for my shirts anyway. I'm just going to go to the competitive bike and see what I can do with it, prove myself again. But it was never realistically going to happen. Partly with that financial gulf, partly because of all the people in the paddock. Quartararo knows that Yamaha can do this because it has done it with him recently enough. You know, he's got proof in that world champion trophy at home and all the success he had up to that point that Yamaha can get the job done, and that will give him that loyalty, but also reason for actual faith that a lot of riders looking from the outside won't have. But also, my last point on this, part of me just keeps thinking, okay, I doubt it would have been enough with such a big financial cap, but I wonder how far Aprilia was off just being a bit more convincing. If Aprilia had converted a few more chances, if Maverick Vinales and Aleix Espargaro had got the job done to that last percent a few more times, if the bike had blown up a few less times, could it have made it a better sell? Has Aprilia not also been able to make quite enough of a case beyond the money? Simon's shaking his head now. There's been a lot of good visual cues in this podcast for when I start talking and what people think of it.
I don't think so. Simply because riders know the level of a bike better than probably anyone else does because they spend time on track alongside it. He will know the level of this bike with, you know, apart from all the mechanicals and apart from the two riders that are on it not quite being able to convert it, he'll have seen what it's capable of. He'll have got an impression of what he could do on it from seeing what they can do on it, especially with Aleix, who he's pretty pally with. You know, they'll have talked about strengths and weaknesses. Aleix, I'm sure, will have spoken to him to try and pitch him on why he should come to Yamaha or to Aprilia, knowing Aleix. So I think for me, he'd have understood where the level was here. And maybe if they'd made a Yamaha matching offer that kind of proved that there was more to come, he'd have considered it. But I think, you know, the reality is this is kind of the Aprilia at the level of the Aprilia with the funding available. He'll have known that.
Yeah, I think it's like just hearing him speak and the positives he accentuated is like your brain just automatically switches into a mode of, okay, this is why I need to make that decision. Now I need to find reasons for why I like it. And the reason to make this decision is all the financial factors we've talked about. And then after it, you can talk about, you know, oh, well, look, the Aprilia's gearbox broke anyway. It's unreliable. Oh, look, like the bike never strings together two successive good sessions in terms of pace because it's oscillating all the time. Oh, look, in the later half of the season, all the equipment's going to be consistently on fire and burning the riders. They complain about it all the time. Now, if Aprilia offered him 12 mil and Yamaha offered him 4, then it'd be like, oh, look, just look how quick it was with Maverick, how quick it was with Aleix, how quick it is with everybody. I would do such great things with that bike. You can make the case one way, you can make the case the other way. I think it wasn't about the case for me. So even if Aprilia was slightly more convincing, he would always find the reasons to say no that aren't just money, even if the money seems to me like a no-brainer, the most important part of this equation particularly.
So now on to the episode that we actually planned to bring you this week, and it's another one of our interview specials, this time with one of the most influential people in the World Championship. Carlos Ezpeleta, MotoGP's sporting director, sat down with Simon for an exclusive interview about the state of the series and where it's going and its future. And you might be listening to it thinking, Simon, you're missing something. You should ask him about Liberty Media taking over MotoGP. The reason that is not in this interview is because when we recorded it, that news wasn't quite in the public domain, so Carlos wasn't up for chatting about it. But if you listen carefully, you can get a few hints in some of his answers about that little bombshell that was coming up. So, Simon, I imagine most listeners will be relatively familiar with with obviously the Ezpeleta name, but with Carlos and where he fits into MotoGP. But just to kind of fill it out for everybody, what does his remit encompass? What is his role? And what have your impressions of him in that role been?
So Carlos has kind of worked his way up through the ranks of the family business. Whenever I first encountered him, he was a kind of a failed mid-level Spanish championship car driver who'd found a gig driving the safety car in MotoGP, and then from there sort of progressed his way up through the ranks within Dorna, and is now in the sporting director role, which essentially entails running everything that happens on track. If that makes sense, he kind of sits above all of that. So we're talking regulations, we're talking stewarding, we're talking new circuits, calendar, kind of everything that's not, sponsorship, putting bikes on track with money is in his domain. And to be fair to him, he's done a good job of it. Nepotism allegations have been made. Obviously, it's the nature of who he is and what name he carries, but he does a really good job with it. He has, I think, made a positive impact on the role since he took it over in, I want to say 2018, maybe, without Googling it to look it up mid-podcast recording. But he's done a good job with it, and he has been working very, very closely with the new chief commercial officer, Dan Rossamondo, and you can kind of see the two of them rubbing off on each other and becoming a really strong partnership as well. So I think we've not yet seen kind of the full extent of where Carlos is going to take MotoGP. But what else is there to say, really?
Well, the other thing we should highlight is that he was really keen to chat to us, which was much appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about getting him on the podcast since we did the podcast with Dan Rossamondo back in December. It's been a bit of a conversation between him and I at various points about we need to get Carlos on, and I bumped him into him on the Thursday night of the Portuguese Grand Prix at a Michelin Moto E tyre launch, and said, we need to do it at some point. Let me know whenever you're free. What weekend is kind of quiet and free for you? And he said, well, let's do it on Saturday morning. So we ended up going to his office on the Saturday morning of the Portuguese Grand Prix, Portimao. We recorded the 30-minute interview you're about to hear, and then sat for another hour in his office watching qualifying in an FP3, which it was off the record, but was actually much more interesting in terms of what he told me, which, is a bit of a tease, but it'll inform us going forwards. It's good to get time to share opinions with these guys because it helps us, it helps them. So yeah, a really, really interesting and useful experience all around talking with Carlos.
Yeah, and I think if Simon feels the off-the-record stuff was more interesting, fair enough, because often these chats are, but what he says on the record in what you're about to hear is pretty good, pretty open as well. So let's get straight onto it. Here is Carlos Ezpeleta in conversation with Simon.
Carlos, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you, and thank you for taking some time out of a race weekend schedule to talk to the race about MotoGP.
Thank you, so my pleasure to be here with you. You guys do an excellent job, so thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. So we'll jump straight in, and I think like I said, everything that we've got to ask you about the future, and I think the kind of the most pressing thing that's on the cards at the minute is the new rules for 27. Can you give us a bit of an idea of what the timeline's going to be for making some announcements and when we're going to see what we're looking at?
I can give you our ideal timeline, which is basically our target. I think before the summer we'll have the whole thing settled. Honestly, it's as everybody knows, we work on the 5-year terms,
yeah.
And the last 3 I think have been sort of very stable, not much change. Of course, for a lot of things in safety and sustainability and also as well the entertainment side, there's a lot of things that we'd want to change if we have opportunity. So we're working on with the manufacturers on a number of items. Of course, ride height devices is one, aerodynamics is another, and power in general. So performance in general is one that we want to address as well. Of course, there's a big sustainability speech within the new regulations, which is very important to us. and entertainment as well, show. So really, I think we're getting to a really good point. I think that even where we are now, all parties would be very happy to go in that direction. So just in general, very positive.
Has safety been the main driver for it?
It says, yeah, basically, to be honest, as much as, and everything that's safety is also performance.
Yes.
So every time a rider comes into the box and says, I have a wheelie pop, I have a grip problem, it's arguable that solving that problem is on the benefit of safety, but of course,
yes,
it's really not, because you're making the bike faster, which is increasing its performance, which is decreasing safety, because the riders are riding to the limit all the time, and no matter, so you're just sort of making that limit higher and higher every time you improve the bike for safety reasons.
Yes.
So that's how we got to this position, which is not a critical position, sure. But, if we want to take the chance to sort of figure that out for the next trip.
So I guess reading into that, then maybe we're going to see things not go backwards, but be put a little bit more control with the rider. Because I know that that's something that every time we speak to Casey, that's one of his big things about dialing it back a little bit. And
yeah, of course. Well, I think, in my opinion, no matter how the bikes evolve and in which direction, electronics, aerodynamics, the better rider always wins, in my opinion. Yeah. Of course, there's differences between the bikes, but in an ideal situation where all the bikes are the same, I think the best rider always wins. Having said that, I think that there's a safety and sustainability. So, in relation to the question before, less performance always means more sustainability normally. So that's a big, a big target for us. It's very important for the championship to use less fuel, more sustainable, 100% fuel for 2027. So a lot of that, and then of course making the rider even more important, because I think the riders are at the center of the show already now. But maybe making overtaking less challenging, making the effect on the pressure, or the front tire pressure less relevant. So there's things that I think we can maneuver.
Yeah, I think everyone in motorsports having conversations about sustainability and about the longer term future. And there's a lot of people who are smarter than me that I've listened to who say that the way to keep internal combustion alive is to do what we can around it, and that seems to be what you guys are doing really well with the synthetic fuels, the stuff that Michelin's doing with the Moto E tires. We're making small improvements that's going to help keep the championship not electric for what fans want, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Well, from with my Dorna shirt on, and of course we do have an electric series which is working very well, and there's development to that, and it's sort of a parallel path.
Yes.
The reality on two wheels in the industry, and to be honest, as much as we are the pinnacle of technology, both MotoGP in our side, but also Premier four-wheel motorsports, they are the premier of technology in four wheels. Mm-hmm. We're both really reactive to the industry, not predictive, and that makes our job much easier. So we're not, let's say, we're pioneers in developing the technology, but not in sort of deciding which technology we go, through. So, and the reality is that the industry, the two-wheel industry, is not there. It's not a hybrid. It's not electric. Yes. That's the reality. And individual transportation of a person cannot be more efficient than on a motorcycle. Yes. So I think, we're very proud in MotoGP to be at the top of that pyramid with the two wheels. And that means everything. It doesn't only mean, internal combustion engine. It means the motorcycle, but of course the tires, helmets, leathers, all of that technology, which is, derives into billions of people around the world being able to move from point A to point B at a very accessible price with a very, very low carbon footprint, and safer, more safe every day. So all of that technology is developed here, and that's what, we have to make this platform a platform for all partners to be interested to develop that technology.
Yes. In terms of the new rules, kind of looking into the specifics a little bit, what areas are you guys looking at? And we know that, the consensus seems to be that we're going to see maybe 850 engines. Are we going to see significant aero reductions? Are the ride height devices going to get the chop?
Well, of course, there's not that much I can disclose. You seem to have done your homework pretty well, so I'll leave it at that.
People, people in the paddock are like, they like to talk to us.
Yeah, as soon as information leaves this office. You got it more or less right. I think now aero and the wings have become a part of the sport, not only the sport but all the industry as well. And I think the manufacturers are using that to even market their bikes in the street. The bikes, some people will be in favor, some people won't, but the bikes are now looking very, very cool. They're looking racy. They're looking very different, which is something that I like, as a bias to other motorsports where you paint the cars one single color, you wouldn't be able to tell one from the other.
Yeah.
And I like it that they have such distinct personalities here.
Yeah. It's
really cool. And we've also done a good job at containing the cost with only one update, so only two possible fairings per season. So that, that's more or less taken care of. What we do want to now is sort of limit what they're doing. And therefore, so if you sort of limiting the size means that its effect is less. It's less on the riders, it's less on the, on the overtakes, it's less on the front tire pressure. So it's less for everything. It's less on performance, of course, while still maintaining, the road relevance, the exoticness of, the design and everything. So that's more or less our target.
Fair enough. Has it been a difficult negotiating process trying to get all the factories to align, or have they been?
It's been, as you know, we're very, very proud of consensus in this paddock, and that we more or less do all of our major decisions with unanimity, which is, I think, a great value. So we've been here maybe for a year now, a year and a half, working through it, and I think that the final regulations will be something like 80 to 90% unanimity. Okay. So we're happy. I'm very happy with that because everybody has understood the value in having regulations that everybody likes, including ourselves, of course.
You've mentioned it a few times, the tire pressure issue. And I guess that you guys are pretty sick of hearing riders talking and complaining about tire pressure these days, because I know it's been like this kind of perennial bugbear for a while now as we try to address it.
Yeah, to be honest, hats off to Michelin. They do such an incredible job. It is true that we've been with them for a while now, and it's like any relationship, it's a working relationship, and they're such an incredible partner on all levels, technically, and from the performance of the tire for sure, number one, but also commercially, as they're doing so much for sustainability within MotoGP and the environment, of course, with Moto E. So that's the first thing to be said. During the last years or so, we've got into a very sort of rigid system of introducing novelty to the tires. So at the beginning of the Michelin era, they were doing a lot of development, bringing in new stuff a lot, and the manufacturers gave us feedback to say, we want to test a tire for a year,
yes,
at least, before it's introduced, always. And so Michelin has worked with that mindset, and the reality is that the bikes have changed and evolved quite a bit, and they're sort of using a tire which, so their hats off because they're doing such an incredible job. And of course, there's things on the bikes now that are probably creating problem where there wasn't one.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that a while ago, some manufacturers sort of started going very low with their pressure, and that sort of creates a domino effect because if he's going lower, then I'm going lower, and then so it's sort of been a number of factors that have led us to have to implement a minimum tire rule, a minimum pressure rule. But to be honest, after the experience of last year, and sort of working with the numbers, etc., after only one race, which is, that's the reality, after one race, I think the riders are much happier now. I think we've gotten to a point where the numbers, where it makes sense, where it's, safety is at the forefront. That's the most important thing. So nobody wants a tire having any problems.
Of course.
So that's where I think that, it makes a lot of sense. Michelin has worked, very hard with the teams, and I think we're in a good position.
Cool. Is it possible that we're going to see, from speaking to Michelin, they were saying this may be a prospect that we're going to see one of the in-season tests this year become a Michelin test where they're all rolling out new tires? Is that something that's on the radar?
Yeah, I think actually I got the question from you guys, and I asked Michelin. It's not something that they want to oblige on the teams and the riders, but it's something that's going to happen. So they are going to bring a new tire structure, so a new construction of the front. The reality is that at the level that MotoGP is at now, the sensibility of the riders, the bikes, it's just so high that, now they're doing, of course, if you have humidity in the tire, it makes the tire pressure more sensible because, it's more sensible to pressure and temperature, etc. when there's humidity within the tire. And now the teams are, when they're pumping air into the tire, they're pumping it out to make sure, they're filtering all the humidity out of the tire. So there's a lot of things that are now going into, because everything is just such a high level, that it's pretty, it's pretty special, to be honest. But yeah, I think that everybody's doing their part.
I mean, I think we're both cycling fans, and I can see, that marginal gains mentality that Sky brought to cycling 10 years ago. You can really see it catching up now, where every 100th is being hunted for here.
Yes, and especially because, if you look at yesterday's, practice where, the top 10 were going into Q2, and that was half a second over 100 seconds, basically. It's...
I think at one point, Maverick and Mark did the same time for P1. Yes. We were deciding P1 on their second fastest.
Yes.
lap. It's crazy.
And it's 0.5%,
Yeah.
It's really, and that's the difference between 10th and 1st. So these guys are going, and everybody's playing it to the, to the decimal.
Exactly. Looking at the grid structure for the future, is 24 the hard limit, or the goal, I should say, rather, for you guys? Is that what you'd like to see?
I would say it's the hard limit, but not the goal.
Okay.
So probably the other way around.
Okay.
Honest. Yeah. If we were being selfish, and which we're not, but with a sport as great and as entertaining as we have now, explaining 22 or 24 stories is quite a challenge.
Yeah.
And presenting those riders into the newer fans, which are our target, of course, at the moment, it's more complicated. And I don't think our experience with 24 riders in 2022, we saw that there probably wasn't, that much in favor. Of course, you're then at a point that if another manufacturer comes in and we're only with 22 riders, it means one manufacturer would never be able to have at least one manufacturer will never be able to have an independent team.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, a sporting advantage to have 4 bikes on grid. So then it sort of circles around, to be honest, but it's not our target to have 24. If we could avoid it right now, I'd say we would rather avoid it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of the sporting advantage from having lots on the grid, is there some work going on? Is there some things that you guys are trying to do to maybe nudge some of the factory or some of the satellite teams away from the Italian brand and to partner up with some of the others going forward? We know that Yamaha are keen to get a satellite team, and
so of course there's a lot of noise about this, a lot of chatter, and there's sporting matters and technical matters, and there are things like the free market.
Yeah.
And as you know, and we're proud of, the independent teams are very important to the challenge. Very important.
Yes.
Having a strong regulation limit to saying you cannot have more than 6 spikes, so you can't have 3 satellite independent teams, is actually worse for the independent teams, because if you go into today's paradigm, without saying any names, but manufacturer A does not have an independent team, manufacturer B has 3 independent teams, manufacturer A needs to present an offer which is appealing enough for that change to happen.
Yes.
And if Dorna stops manufacturer B from having 3 teams, it means that manufacturer A has all the power for that negotiation.
Yes.
Which is all what we would like. Having said that, of course, it's in our interest for all the manufacturers to have independent teams.
Yeah.
That is, and that's where we're pushing and saying so because of the economics. If that happens, it's economically it's an investment for Dorna, because we are subsidizing manufacturers which have independent teams.
Yes.
So it's an extra cost for us, but we're happy to have it because we think it's important for the championship.
And what you can do, and what it seems that that you've managed to do really well this year going into next year, is that with the concessions, with a little bit more boost to some of the manufacturers that are struggling, you've kind of found a way to make their offer more appealing without influence in decisions. Yamaha suddenly look like a better option than they were 12 months ago.
Yeah, I think so. That's the case. Of course, it's hard to say struggle. It is because of today's competitive environment, but yesterday, half a second.
Yeah, well, this is the problem. We say struggle, and then you look at the time sheets, the two don't quite align. But
again, incredible credit to Yamaha and Honda. They're incredibly committed to the championship. They're rethinking a lot of stuff, and of course, we can only wish that they're back to being very, very competitive as soon as possible. And I think having an independent team is part.
Cool. And then in terms of new manufacturers, we've heard some rumors that obviously I'm not expecting you to confirm or deny anything.
Well, but they're not rumors, but when they say it out,
thankfully, we heard some BMW rumors quite a while ago, and we've been trying to find a way to write the story, and then thankfully BMW came and said, "Hey, we want to be in MotoGP," which is, considering the partnership you guys have had with them for a long time, that's really good news.
It is
to take it to the next level.
We've had rumors before.
Yes, of course.
It's important to keep expectations and aspirations. But yeah, it would be amazing. BMW is an incredible brand globally, but both on 2 wheels and 4 wheels, and a brand that honestly, even though they haven't had a lot to do with motorsport in 4 wheels, for example, it's such a sporty, perception that they have. And it's, competition, performance and everything. It's at the center of their brand. That's why I think it's an incredible fit. We've been associated with BMW for a very long time now. We're super happy. I'm a huge BMW fan myself. It's a conversation that's happening. But of course, there's a lot to do for sure.
Yeah. But I guess the target will obviously be 27 with these new. If something is to come from it, that's the logical time.
Yeah, definitely. That's what makes more sense. Yeah, but it's up to them to decide that. Of course, there will be work and there will be consequences on the grid for that. But yeah, I think that they see all the value in MotoGP for their brand, not only their motorrad.
Yes,
but for the whole BMW ecosystems.
Yeah, exactly. Are we likely to see much change in the future in the next coming years with the calendar?
Are we likely to see change? I think that, there's making the calendar is an incredible challenge, and it is so challenging.
I can imagine.
And there's a lot of things that go into that. Of course, at this, things like sustainability, logistics, and efficiency, and also trying to make the events as successful as possible. So not having events, where there's bad weather, or where there's 2 events close to each other at this similar time of the year. There's a lot of that. Of course, there's other very big factors like culturally, if there's anything happening, for example, next year with Ramadan.
Yes.
It's another, it's another factor that you have to, work around. I think that, of course, it seems that we will be shifting from, that shift has started already from, 75% to Europe some years ago, and that probably looks towards 50-50 in, 6, 7, 8 years from now, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
But there's such an incredible appetite for global sporting rights in general, and MotoGP is, of course, at the forefront of that. I think that will be some of the shift. Of course, there will be a time where we probably won't have 4 races in Spain. That's going to happen sooner rather than later, I think. But of course, all of this takes a lot of time. You have government officials coming in to see you, and they say that they want to do this, and then sign some papers, and it's a very long process. They have to build a massive facility. I think people that haven't been to events, but also people that have been to events, the sheer size of the facilities for a global motorsport, the size and also the infrastructure that goes in, the level of expertise that goes down to cleaning the track, paint. It's so many things. Painting. Last year, Loris, Caparossi, who has been working for us for a very long time, and he went to India with our Dorna guys well in advance to supervise everything. And he said, after the event, and told me, Carlos, I never realized how much work there is behind, and I've been in the paddock for 45 years, and I had never realized how much work, how many different things, across the board it takes to make a successful MotoGP event. So, stuff happens slowly, but it happens, and that's why I think that the calendar, we're not looking to go over 22 events, which is our contractual limitation now, but I think it will continue to be. We'll work together also with the riding team to see how that works better for them. If we want to start sooner and end a bit later, so it's less concentrated and they have more off time. Yes. That's some of the conversations that are going on.
Fair enough. Is there markets that you guys have to be in? Is there circuits that you'd love to go to?
Everybody knows that we have it's not a limitation. It's not not even a challenge. It's just the reality, and safety is so important for us that a lot of our, the greater part of our calendar are destinations which are somewhat remote to major cities, and that's the reality. And I think it's part also of the heart and soul of the championship that you make a trip.
Yes.
MotoGP is a trip experience. It's people. It's a part of the. People like to take their bikes. It's a community. Yeah. People like to take their bikes. They like to go to the ride. Of course, in growing the sport, it would be great to also be somewhat close to bigger cities, because of course the younger, fanatic fan wants to, you have to make it easier for them. Yeah. But there are a lot of destinations coming up. I think there's a lot of exciting things. We have U.S. is a market that I think that we will be working on, and we'll try to expand there soon. And of course, Southeast Asia and South America are two vital ones for us. We'd love to have a race in Africa as well. Yeah. To be a part of that continent, because we think also as Africa develops, the motorcycle is going to be a strong part of that development. Yeah. We'll see some of what happened in Southeast Asia,
Yes.
Decades ago. So it's a healthy environment, I'd say. Southeast Asia, South America, those are places where we're looking to be soon, I hope.
And every time I have this conversation with fans, every time we do a reader's questions episode in the podcast, it always inevitably comes up that, there's a new circuit being built right next to where your new American team are from in Tennessee. There's lots of interest in getting it out into Nashville.
Yeah, we will. We know the guys from Flat Rock well. They're building an incredible event.
It seems it, yeah.
Great facility. They have the club course, which is not, designed for MotoGP specifically, is about to be finished, for what I understand.
And then finally, we're here round 2 of the championship. It looks like we're in for an amazing season. We've got this super strong narrative of the Ducati battle. We've got Mark, who's looking like he's finally back to his way. I don't think we could be in a better place in terms of the storylines we're starting to see already for this season.
Yeah, there's a lot of storylines. I think that Brad is also looking incredibly strong. And Pedro coming here from Moto2 was immediately not surprised to everybody, because I think everybody had that sort of expectation already. But a lot of stories, the Aprilias I think are going to be strong. Honda and Yamaha's come back. There's so many stories out there, and also for what was it, 4 or 5 riders only have their contracts signed for next year. We have a conversation, and I told my guys at Dorna that are guys that I won't participate in the game, but they all have to guess the teams and riders for next year, and send an Excel over. I said I want to participate. To keep it as fair as possible.
It's okay. We've done a full podcast episode on it already.
So it's going to be. I don't think anybody probably gets that right now, because there's always sort of a September, October unexpected, factor, always, every year.
I remember 2 years ago we had a fairly confident lineup, and then the Suzuki news came, and it just blew everything out of the water. And so you can never guess.
You can never, and also, like, is it clear what who's where, who's going where? There's a lot of question marks there. Yeah. And I think that's part of the narrative, of course, for the championship. So I think it as you said, a lot of stuff happening on track, a lot of stuff happening off track. The field is so competitive. All those guys are so quick and so talented, that it's going to, of course, every season, you sort of get these goosebumps every year before the season. But I think this year is especially interesting.
Agreed. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Good to catch up.
So thank you so much, Carlos Ezpeleta, for giving us your time there. Let's get into a bit of chat about everything you said. So joining me, Matt Beer, for that. Obviously, Simon is still here, and Val Khorounzhiy has joined us now as well. But Simon, let's stick with you first. You said when you first encountered Carlos Ezpeleta, he wasn't in this sort of role. You can understand why people, given how MotoGP sometimes operates, have kind of thrown nepotism allegations at him. But it's fair to say, I think, that your opinion of him is pretty high these days.
Yeah, he has. I mean, I'm not going to start the podcast by criticizing his dad, because that would be mean. But he's a different person from his father, and he has a more modern management style. His dad is far beyond retirement age and is quite old school in how he does things, and I think that was reflected kind of through the organisation and especially through some of the other people around him as well, who were all from a similar era. Carlos has come in as new blood, and to be fair to him, he hasn't just done things the way that they've always been done. He has shaken things up. He's pushed new ideas. He's certainly pushed new levels of kind of openness, because we've gone from having his dad, who ran the championship and doesn't speak fantastic English and would certainly never have came on our podcast, to Carlos, who is open enough to to sit with us for 30 minutes and discuss all sorts of things. It's a different way. It's a more modern way, and it's definitely, as someone that's there to cover the championship and write about it and learn about it and share that, it's easier.
Let's get into some of the meat of the stuff he discussed. One of the things that stuck out to me really, really immediately, there were a few answers where he was as cagey as you would expect someone who can't give away a lot of the future secrets of the championship to be. But on the BMW link, the fact that BMW is interested in coming to MotoGP in the next regulations era in 2027, he was more gung-ho than you, I think, in terms of being willing to bang straight on about that on the record, which, given that we've had this kind of on our radar for a little while and been keen to get it out there, is very promising, I thought.
I mean, it certainly hints that the plan to have the new rules announced before the summer break this season is very, very close to happening, because he gave us a fairly accurate breakdown of who's going where and what's going to happen with it. He clearly wants to see change for the same reasons as we do, because at the end of the day, part of his job briefing is to make an entertainment product as well as a sporting product. And that's what I mean about, he kind of sees across the board, despite his role as sporting director, he gets the bigger picture, which is good, because it's good for us, it's good for the fans, it's good for the, watching good racing. He was fairly open about what they're looking to get rid of. Praise the Lord, the ride height devices are going. We're going to see aero curtailed. I genuinely, I think that this is going to be a set of new regulations that are going to be fairly well received by the fan base once they get to grips with them.
I think the only thing that won't be fairly well received is 2027's not that close. It actually is, for me, it feels like a considerable amount of time away still, and I think there is a feeling, not among everybody, but certainly among some, that what is going on already needs to be curbed before that. That would be what I would say. That, still another almost 3 full seasons, 4, 5, 6, 3 full seasons with, with the ride height devices, with the aero Christmas tree ornament stuff, getting more and more pervasive with every season. A lot of the fixes that are being implemented for 27 are fixes that you would like to see earlier, but at the same time, as Mr. Ezpeleta himself, repeatedly points out, it is a question of full agreement among the participants, and that's the governance structure that is in place, and that's the governance structure that they prefer. It's not quite the Formula One level, where there's voting and some teams end up unhappy and some factories end up unhappy. Here they can be sort of publicly unhappy, but privately they're not unhappy enough not to sign off, because everybody needs to sign off on the changes. So you will always be limited on what you can do and what you can twist their arm over. And when I talk about devices and aero and stuff, I mean Ducati primarily. I think the vibe from the paddock reporting has been pretty clear that they are the most advanced on those, so they are the ones most loath to lose the advantage on those. Not necessarily just Ducati, but Ducati has obviously been at the forefront of that development. I know there's only so much you can get through them. I understand that, but it's that one's hard to explain to fans. It's like, why won't you just remove the devices and curb the aero and limit it more? That's just hard to explain. And there are positives also, I would argue, to the devices and specifically to the aero in terms of the bike stability. I think we're seeing riders crash less badly in certain ways, but worse in others, if that makes any sense. It is not as simple as black and white. It's not just get that garbage off the bike immediately. But that is certainly, if we're already doing that, the fact we're only doing it in 27 is mentally incongruous.
It is one of those motorsport logic things. It's the people inside the paddock. It's like, obviously the structure is that these rules run till then, and to change you need disagreement, so we will continue throwing money and development time. And the top manufacturers will be going right up to the last minute on this, won't they? I don't see anybody who is any good sacrificing 2026 with poor aero because they know it's not going to be needed to the same extent in 27. This millions of euros will carry on being spent on aero development and ride height device development until the moment they are removed or curbed as required. Now, I would say though, like, we've had a lot of listener questions that have in recent months along the lines of, are the manufacturers just going to stand in the way and water down these new rules? But the vibe from Carlos Ezpeleta, it was very much about consensus and people being on board with stuff. So putting aside Val's very valid point that 3 more seasons is a long time to wait for something everyone's agreed on, it does at least feel like it won't be pushed back on too much, that fans will get a large amount of what they want. Is that a fair assessment, Simon?
I mean, I get the perception that Ducati, to an extent, are all about show when it comes to these things. They have to be opposed to the aero restrictions because the aero restrictions are something that they've put a load of money into, and I think they kind of feel like they need to be the people that stands up to them. But at the same time, whenever you speak to people who understand aero far more than I do, they are very, very quick to say, yeah, well, whenever we have less aero, the less aero we have going to have to do more work, and the people that are going to make it do more work early on are the people with the more experience, which is Ducati. Yeah. So they're still going to come out of this quite strongly. They've got to know that. Because they were the people that led the field in this and continue really to lead the field in it, even as others try to do other things around them. You get the sense that they're still gonna be strong here, especially, realistically, we're still probably going to go into that season, as Carlos says later on in the podcast, with a lot of Ducatis on the grid. So they're still going to have a ton of data. They're going to be getting all of these guys onto quick bikes, on the new 850 bikes fairly early on, I'd imagine, because why wouldn't you? You'd get as many people riding the prototype as quickly as you can to get a bit of a feel for it, especially when you've got, the 17 million World Championship level riders that they have signed up to race for them for the next 12 years or whatever it is at the minute. They're in a good position, and they're going to come out of this in a good position. So they can afford to be a bit bullish about it while still, saying, "Oh, woe is us," to try and leverage whatever concessions they want or try to get out of it. Yeah,
that was not what I was saying. Was not really. Simon's words made me realize it could have come across that way, but it was not criticism of Ducati necessarily, because Ducati's already, I think, approaching its current situation in a very reasonable way. It's allowed the Yamaha and Honda concessions for all the good they're doing right now. It's allowed the proper title fights between its rivals between its riders instead of just ensuring a comfortable win for one or the other. It's being very reasonable, and given Ducati's advantage in many ways, we owe it a lot to Ducati, the fact that the championship's good. I mean, because it could be really bad with the advantage that they have, and instead it's proper. It's just, but there's only so much you can expect them to do without having their arm twisted, and I understand MotoGP not wanting to twist that arm more than they feel they not even can get away with, but more than they feel is philosophically right. And I think also the question of philosophy, and we should talk about this, is the independent team stuff and the distribution of those independent teams.
So, like you say, he alludes to the fact there will still be a lot of Ducatis on the grid in 2027, but he also discussed quite in detail there the possibility of nudging things along a bit so that they are spread out a little bit more. He mentioned Yamaha in particular, conspicuously without an independent team on its side right now, and really needing more bikes on the grid to start helping out of its current situation. What's your take, Simon, on Ezpeleta's view on this kind of imbalance? We wrote a piece. You wrote a piece last year where I think headlines saying like the 6-4-24 dream not working out for Dorna, why that dream died. This plan that there'd be, 6 manufacturers, 4 bikes each, 1 factory, 1 satellite team, creating a 24 bike grid. We're so far from any number in that equation working out now. Doesn't seem like Dorna's still keen for that. Well, it may be keen for that, but I don't think it's got any realistic expectation of getting back there right now. But what's your take on how much it might be willing to kind of move the chess pieces around, and what can it do? I
mean, it seems like they don't want to do things for the right reasons. Let's be honest. Whenever you hear Ezpeleta saying that, we don't want to create an artificial market so that factories get get what they want, and especially when we're in a position right now, whenever we're realistically reading reports that Yamaha are courting Pramac to try and steal them away from Ducati. If we were in a position where they contractually had to have a satellite team, they would have been a lot less, they'd been a lot more restrictive position on what they could offer. They wouldn't have to offer. They wouldn't have to put as much money or resource into whatever deal they're potentially floating to Campanati, the Pramac boss. So it's a good thing. The free market is a good thing in this case. I do get that. It's just, on top of that, it's really unrealistic that we're going to go to that dream, that position, because that is also the nature of the free market here. And right now, Ducati are willing to put 8 bikes in the grid, and as much as that's unpopular with people, it kind of kicks the can to the others to, well, you're the ones that have to step up your game and produce a better bike and a better offer to steal some of these people away if you want to. Now, it sounds increasingly likely that BMW are going to come and join the party in 2027. They're, potentially going to come in with a big money package that's going to extend to more than just building 2 bikes. Maybe they see the future as 4 bikes to help with development from day one, which is quite similar to what KTM did. Maybe that means that's 2 less Ducatis in the grid because of free market forces and the money that they have to offer. Maybe we see Yamaha take 2 more Ducatis off the grid, and then suddenly we're not actually a million miles away from that kind of goal. Yeah. So it's not unrealistic, but I think that Dorna are going about it the right way in not forcing it through by regulation.
Yeah, I completely. I think the MotoGP right now, in being good, owes so much to its satellite teams. So the least it can do is not undercut the bargaining ability of those satellite teams when it comes to negotiating with prospective manufacturers. And again, I don't even have to call that a free market principle necessarily or being anything philosophical. It's just like, in this case, it just seems fair to me. And it doesn't really seem bad for the championship. I know it's a vicious circle, right? Yamaha is being made worse by the fact that it doesn't have 2 extra bikes. So part of why the current M1 is not good is that there's less of it than there could be. And part of why the current Desmosedici is so good is there's more of it than there could be. I absolutely understand that, 100%. But even as a general viewer, would my MotoGP experience watching MotoGP be made better if we took away Desmosedicis from Pramac or VR46 and gave those teams M1s? Absolutely not. Not even close. I do not want more of these M1s on the grid. Throw them in the trash. Don't want to see any of them. So for me, the onus is on Yamaha to come up with a financial sweetener and plan of work with a customer team, but also just make its bike more competitive. And I think the fact that it's not proving easy shows me that MotoGP has done something right with its current formula, where satellite teams come in not to just cash a check from their manufacturer partner, but try to win. And, win races, feel regularly, come into every weekend feeling like they have a real tangible chance at achieving something great. I think that's really important. And yeah, maybe in terms of also the longer term idea of keeping Yamaha competitive, which would be great, keeping it around, which, we can never fully take for granted with any manufacturer. It is important for it to get a good partner team. And we know that in the past, obviously, Yamaha satellite teams have been good and important and have been a worthwhile place also for talent to debut on the grid. How many good riders we have on the grid right now who made their way through there. But right now, look, if you ask me personally, what would I prefer to see in 25? It's still 8 Desmosedicis or 2 of those Desmosedicis becoming M1s. Maybe I should answer M1s, but I struggle to, being honest there, honestly. Like, I don't know, man.
It's a horrible irony, isn't it, that after that, Tech 3 did such great things with customer Yamahas, Petronas did even greater things, and now Yamaha is the manufacturer that's in that no satellites position. I found this a bit educational because I would have looked at it from a moral point of view and gone 6-4-24, making every manufacturer have 1 satellite team. That seems really fair. That is good for satellites. But the way it's turned out, and I want to give huge credit to Ducati for this, for how it's used its satellites, the freedom and chances it's given them, and how it's seen the benefit of just having loads of bikes and taking them seriously. It's created this, let's call it free market, even if it's not quite the right term, this sort of free competitive situation where it's in manufacturers' interests to give their satellites good stuff and fight over them. That has turned out to be the absolute best thing for satellites, where a mandated situation actually Wouldn't have been. I'm slightly surprised by it, but I also love it. Let's talk about one more thing that came up in the chat with Carlos Ezpeleta, and that is the calendar, something that comes up a lot in this podcast, often when Simon and Val are looking like they've died at the end of a Sunday night, and Simon's about to jump on a plane and Val's trying to work out what time zone he lives in. The calendar is long. It's probably not going to get any shorter anytime soon, but the indication is that it shouldn't be growing, at least, and it might be moving around a little bit. Simon, you can go first, as you're the guy jumping on off the planes. What's your takeaway from how Carlos described the future of the MotoGP calendar?
I wouldn't disagree with a longer calendar if it meant a bit more time off in season, because it's generally the back to back stuff that is so punishing. Plus, on top of that, like, the reality is that for a lot of people in MotoGP, the season already starts stupidly early. My first trip away this year was, I think, the 15th of January for team launches. So if it just means that we do like a week of team launches the way F1 does, and then instead of spreading them out over like a month and then start the season 2 weeks earlier, that's not a bad thing for me. It also, I will absolutely take a MotoGP season that starts in mid-February if we get to start by going to Phillip Island in February. And having like a proper nice warm race down there instead of the usual snowy disaster that it is in October. It also makes sense that we're going to pivot towards Asia. That's the other thing. As someone that does an awful lot of flying and doesn't really appreciate it a lot of the time, I know that more overseas races is going to be harder work for everyone in the pack. But at the same time, I think for the fan experience and for bringing the races to fans in particular, we do not need 5 races a season on the Iberian Peninsula. That not whenever entire continents don't have a MotoGP race. I think I've advocated for that since day one. I'm still absolutely in favour of it. I don't care if it means more time away from home and more time in airports and flights. I think we absolutely do need to be going to places like South Africa, places like India, places like South America, which is shockingly absent from the calendar for the foreseeable future because of everything that's going on in Argentina. It is not a bad thing at all.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely, even though I generally seem to like all those Iberian Peninsula races. But yeah, it's just for the health of the championship and stuff, expanding, it makes a lot of sense. It really, really does. And it is inevitable, I think. And Carlos Ezpeleta seems to acknowledge the same. 22 races, it feels like a lot. It really, it helps that the racing is good. Because I can tell you from some other championship examples, when you have 24 races and the racing isn't going to be very good, it is a killer for morale. I know this is rightly seen as a very good job to do, and it is. But when you go into a season knowing you have to cover 24 races of nothing, like it's 24 episodes of Seinfeld or whatever, it's not. It doesn't really, it's difficult. I forgot what I was going to say. That's
Max Steinfeld Verstappen.
Yeah, but I didn't say F1. You added that. I never mentioned Formula One. I don't know. Maybe I was talking something else.
You didn't say F1. And what could you be thinking of? But I would say, reverse to last August when Pecco Bagnaia did the sweep of Austria, and there was a moment there where I was thinking, we've got a lot of MotoGP seasons still to go. I don't know how much we can get out of this. Is it going to become... It's MotoGP. It won't ever be a slog. Is it going to be a relative slog? And then, thanks to Pecco and Jorge Martin between them, it became brilliant right to the end. The indications this season between Martin, Bagnaia and Marc Marquez are that it's going to be brilliant. Even if we had 40 races this season, if we were going all NASCAR in the calendar, it would be entertaining.
We technically do.
Well, we do. Yeah, 40 race weekends, I mean.
Yes, good point. Well made. But it is also a question of rider health and rider risk, unfortunately, and it always has to come up, which is another reason why 22 feels like a bit much. Now, I know what Simon says, and I want to bring it up. It does start very early, and you could condense launch week, and that would be quite important. If it's not for the pesky safety thing, and unfortunately, that's just the sport we are in, that it takes extra effort to go to the track and race and be sure that the bikes are going to be intact and the riders are race ready. If it's not for any of that, I would be the first in line to say ban all of testing. all of it, because it's just a waste of precious life and track time. And just do not waste a second of track time and resources that you are on track. And that would give us the long calendars that we want. Unfortunately, that is a fantasy for however many more years before the tech is so good that it just goes on track and we immediately know it's fine, because the simulators told us that everything is fine, and the simulator is never wrong, which it still is all the time these days.
I mean, there's ways that we could potentially see the calendar change and adapt that wouldn't make that impossible. There's no reason why the first 3 or 4 races of the season couldn't be 4-day weekends.
Oh yeah,
where we get more track time on a Thursday, which is something that's kind of been experimented with in the past in MotoGP.
World Superbikes kind of does it.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit,
yeah, exactly. So there's ways that it could be done. There's ways that we could be cleverer about it. Imagine we got rid of the Sepang test. And we had Monday, Tuesday testing in Qatar, followed by a race weekend. Then we had Monday, Tuesday testing in Sepang, followed by a race weekend there.
Yeah.
There's ways it could be made to work. So I don't think that's an entirely implausible idea. And I think it's something we're going to increasingly see from Dorna as we go forward. I mean, their unilateral decision to have sprint races at every single round of last season kind of hints that they're willing to experiment with the format. And the other thing is that as we go to the 850s, the new bikes in 24 or in 27, hopefully that also makes things a bit safer, and hopefully that reduces the kind of the horrendous 2023 toll of like 500 days without a full MotoGP grid or whatever it was.
A grid of broken riders, which we never ever
Exactly.
want. And even our very good title race, unfortunately, does owe itself to a crash that I never want to see happen again.
Indeed.
Which
exactly.
is at the forefront of my mind.
Yeah. So I think we've, as well as hearing some quite good ideas and some. Go on, Val, before I wrap up.
Yeah, I have to do this. I'm sorry for saying that the Yamaha should go in the trash. It is not a fair thing to say 2 rounds into the season. I feel really bad about it. Just get worked up sometimes. It's not that bad. It's not that far off in terms of lap time. It's just, for some reason, I don't know. I take it back. I'm sorry.
But do you think if Fabio Quartararo was listening to this podcast, do you think he'd listen to that bit and find it really offensive, or just go, "Yeah, Val, here's a bin"?
I wouldn't want to presume. I'm going to dig myself further in.
You've heard his debrief for the last year and a half. So
yeah.
You can take a guess.
I mean, the good thing is that it is going in the bin in 2 seasons.
Boy.
So we do get to start over again, and that's a conversation for a different day. But there will be people thinking about that as they sign their contracts for the future.
It's so easy to get, and this is just a general point. I'm always so wary of just being the bad pundit who's unduly negative about people's life's work. That bike's half a second off a lap. That's nothing. Genuinely, if I built a MotoGP bike, you know how many seconds it would be off a lap? Infinity. It would never finish a lap, obviously. So who am I to say anything?
The one thing to remember, Val, is that the current Yamaha M1 is not anyone's life work, because they've sacked everyone that ever touched the bike up until the start of the season and have replaced them with someone new for 2024. So there's no one left at Yamaha who's going to be offended by that.
Also, Val, you are the conscience of sports punditry. I think that's become clear over the last few months in particular. Anytime we've been a little bit too harsh, like just to me, sports punditry is a degree of theatre, and I welcome MotoGP teams telling us everything we do wrong about podcasting as well, because some of our podcasting involves telling MotoGP teams things we think they do wrong about running MotoGP teams. It's all a game. Anyway, on that note, thank you so much, Carlos Ezpeleta, for your time. Thank you, Simon and Val. Thank you, listeners. Next week, we're back with some actual racing. We'll be coming to you fresh/bleary from the aftermath of the, what is it? What's the official title? Grand Prix of the Americas, not United States Grand Prix, is it? At Austin. Will we be talking about a Marc Marquez clean sweep of COTA? Will we be talking about Marc Marquez leading the championship on a Ducati? We think we might, but we can reconvene in a week's time and find out. Thank you for your time. We'll be back in your ears, fresh from Austin.
The Athletic.